Jason Meyers didn't move to Willow Creek for drama. He moved for his daughter, Ellie, 8 years old, obsessed with sidewalk chalk, and just learning how to swing by herself without needing a push. It was supposed to be a fresh start, quiet, clean, controlled, the kind of place where things made sense. The whole brochure promised community, but that Saturday afternoon, community felt a lot like surveillance. Jason was sitting on a bench with his coffee, watching Ellie kick her feet higher and higher. She laughed every time she lifted off the swing, like she was flying. For once, Jason felt peace, until he heard a voice behind him. "That child has been on the swing for 20 minutes. Jason turned. A woman in a visor and floral print jacket stood with arms crossed, clipboard in hand, tan shoes to clean for a playground. She didn't introduce herself, didn't need to. Her name was Karen Winslow, and in this neighborhood, everyone knew Karen. Jason replied politely, "She's 8. It's her favorite part of the park." Karen sniffed like she smelled something sour. "Other children live here, too. Maybe teach her to share." Jason smiled awkwardly and turned back toward Ellie. But Karen wasn't done. She walked straight to the swing set. What happened next played out in slow motion. Karen stepped right in front of Ellie mid-swing, reached out, grabbed the chain and Ellie's arm at the same time. Ellie's small body jerked, the swing twisted, and she fell sideways onto the mulch. Her scream cut through the park. Jason dropped his cup and ran. Ellie clutched her elbow, face red and scrunched in pain. Karen stood over her like a disappointed teacher, arms still crossed. "You need to control your child," Karen muttered. Jason didn't shout. Not then. He picked up his daughter and cradled her carefully. "Are you okay, honey?" She nodded through tears. Karen started walking away like nothing happened. Jason looked around. No other parents were nearby. Just a few kids on the slide who quickly scattered. He took Ellie home, cleaned up her elbow, and sat her on the couch with a popsicle. But inside, his hands were shaking. Narrator slows slightly. Jason had a camera on his front porch, and another, pointed toward the park. Not for crime, just peace of mind. That night, he reviewed the footage. Ellie laughing, swinging, Karen marching in from the side. The way she grabbed the chain, how she twisted Ellie's arm just enough to knock her off. And then, the part that made Jason freeze. Karen glanced at the camera, dead center, as if she knew it was their dot, and she smiled. Jason replayed that frame 5 times. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of grin someone wears when they think they're untouchable. He clipped the footage and sent it to the HOA security email listed on the neighborhood site. No response that night, not even a confirmation. The next morning, he stopped by the security desk near the clubhouse. "Did you get my video?" Jason asked the man behind the counter. The guy, mid-20s, college kid, chewing gum like it owed him rent, shrugged. "Might have." Karen files like 5 reports a week. Probably just a misunderstanding. Jason's voice didn't raise, but something in his tone made the guy stop chewing. "My daughter has bruises," she screamed. That woman touched her without permission. The guy leaned back in his chair. "Yeah, it's just, she's on the board. Not much we can do without." "A complaint?" Jason blinked. That was the complaint. The man just looked away. Jason turned and left. He got home, sat down, and stared at the blank TV screen. His daughter was napping, arm bandaged, a cartoon playing she wasn't watching. He opened his laptop, pulled up a local parenting Facebook group, hovered over the create post button. Then he clicked and uploaded the video. No caption, no commentary. Just the clip. 10 minutes later, the comments began. First, That's Karen, right? Then she did the same thing to my niece. Another, wait, this happened to us last month, but we were too scared to say anything. And finally, a direct message. No name. Just a profile photo of a bluebird. The message read, "You want the truth about Karen? Meet me behind the bean shack. Come alone." Jason didn't respond to the message right away. He wasn't sure if it was a joke, or worse, bait. But the more he scrolled through the comments under the video he posted, the more his gut screamed that something deeper was going on. Dozens of parents had shared stories, small things, all dismissed, all isolated, until now. A kid shoved off a slide. A basketball confiscated for noise complaints. A teenager fined for hovering too close to HOA fencing. All incidents had one name in common, Karen Winslow. It was just past 9 p.m. when Jason left the house. Ellie was sleeping soundly under a nightlight, and his neighbor, Mrs. Dalton, agreed to sit by the window in case anything came up. The bean shack sat near the edge of Willow Creek's shopping plaza, quiet at night, its back alley lit by a single, flickering bulb and the pale glow of a soda machine. Jason waited for 5 minutes. Then footsteps. A woman in her early 40s approached, hoodie pulled over her head, eyes scanning the dark. "You Jason?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "You the bluebird?" She didn't smile. Just pulled out her phone and tapped a video. She handed it over. Jason watched a shaky clip of a boy, maybe 13, skateboarding down the sidewalk near the park. Karen stormed into frame, holding her phone up like she was documenting a crime. The boy slowed. Karen pointed, shouted. Then she shoved him. Hard. He hit the pavement on his side. The woman's voice cracked slightly. "That's my son, Devin." He broke his wrist that day. Karen claimed he was aggressive and damaging HOA property with his skateboard. "We tried filing a report." Jason looked up, and the woman laughed dryly. "HOA fined us for public disruption," said Devin was a known troublemaker. She even had the board ban skateboarding within 100 feet of all green spaces. That includes sidewalks. Jason exhaled through his nose. "This woman's running the neighborhood like it's her own fiefdom." The woman nodded. "And she's not doing it alone." Jason tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "Her brother-in-law, treasurer of the HOA. Her cousin, she's the compliance officer. Her circle controls the board. That's why none of this ever goes anywhere." Jason narrowed his eyes. "So even when people complain, it just disappears." "Exactly. They bury it in paperwork or vote it down in meetings no one even knows about." Jason handed back the phone. "Thank you. I'm not letting this slide." The woman hesitated. "You'll make yourself a target. Just be ready for it." Jason nodded, stepped back into the shadows, and walked home with the night pressing down like a warning. The next morning, Jason had barely taken a sip of his coffee when he opened his front door and found a yellow envelope duct taped to it. Inside, a formal cease and desist letter, signed by a local law firm representing Karen Winslow. It claimed Jason's video post was defamatory, harassing, and intended to damage community peace. At the bottom, it demanded the post be taken down within 24 hours or legal action would follow. Jason folded the letter, walked into his home office, and pulled up his printer. He printed 6 copies of the letter, one for himself, one for the sheriff's office, and the rest, they'd go to the families messaging him nonstop now, wanting to tell their stories. He posted the cease and desist on the same parenting group. The replies came in fast. Classic Karen move. "She did this to us, too. Let's collect everything. Maybe it's time we show this to someone who'll actually listen." Jason created a shared drive and asked everyone to upload anything they had: photos, videos, screenshots, notes, whole letters. Within hours, the folder filled like a floodgate had opened. There was footage of Karen berating a girl with Down syndrome for being too loud. A recording of a dad being told his son couldn't play in his own driveway because it violated sightline codes. A voice message from Karen warning a neighbor to watch what you say at meetings. Jason's anger burned, but he kept it steady, measured. This wasn't just personal now. This was systemic. Late that afternoon, he received a call. The voice was calm, professional. "This is Detective Ruiz with the county sheriff's office. We've come across a video involving a playground incident last week. Do you have time to talk?" Jason sat up straight. "Yes, I do. And I've got more where that came from." The detective was silent for a beat. "Good, because we've been getting a lot of calls about your hole lately. It's time we look deeper." Narrator pause. Then build tension, and just like that, the game changed. Karen thought she was above the rules, but the uniforms were finally paying attention. Jason hadn't slept much between scanning security footage, organizing testimonials, and fielding non-stop messages from neighbors. He'd barely left his desk. But when Detective Ruiz called again and asked for a meeting, Jason made time. They met at the county substation just outside Willow Creek's border. Ruiz was tall, quiet, early 40s, with eyes that didn't miss much. He'd reviewed the footage from the playground and the new reports. "You're not the first person to come forward," the detective said as he flipped through a folder. "But you're the first to have enough people rally behind you." Jason nodded. "She's been hiding in plain sight, and the HOAS helped her do it." Ruiz looked at him. "We're going to look into misuse of authority, harassment patterns, maybe even misuse of HOA funds if we get enough leads. But I need you to keep gathering proof. Get everything." Jason leaned forward. "I already have people sending documents, letters, photos. We're piecing together a timeline." Ruiz nodded once. "Then keep going. And watch your back." Jason stepped out of the station into the late morning sun. The air felt a little lighter. But back in Willow Creek, things were heating up. Karen had noticed the shift, and she wasn't happy. That afternoon, a new HOA notice arrived in everyone's mailboxes. It wasn't signed by Karen. It was issued from the compliance subcommittee. But everyone knew who pulled the strings. The notice claimed that, due to recent escalations and unrest, the playground would be closed for maintenance indefinitely. Jason stood at the curb, reading it aloud to two other dads. They exchanged looks. "Maintenance?" One of them scoffed, "More like lockdown." An older woman nearby chimed in. "She's trying to bury it again." "Just like always." Jason nodded, grimly. "Then we don't let her." That night, Jason and 3 other parents organized a meeting at his house. They brought laptops, folders, printouts. Someone brought pizza. Another brought a whiteboard. They weren't HOA board members. They were tired parents, tech-savvy teenagers, and one determined retired judge named Earl who lived 3 houses down and didn't like bullies. They called themselves the Willow Watchdogs, and they had a plan. First, they mapped out every known complaint. Then they matched it to HOA meeting minutes, if they could find them. Most minutes were missing. Others were vague. "I've lived here 12 years, Earl muttered, "and I've never seen such sloppy record keeping." It's almost like they were trying not to be accountable. Jason posted another update to the parent group. "We're building something. If you have paperwork, send it. If you were silenced, speak now." The messages poured in faster than before. A woman from the East cul-de-sac shared a blurry photo of Karen. yelling at her daughter over sidewalk chalk. A man sent voice recordings from hall calls. A teenager uploaded a video of Karen snapping at him for parking too diagonally on his own driveway. But one message stood out. A former board member named Brad, who had resigned months earlier without explanation, sent Jason an email with one sentence: "Check the landscaping invoices." From last summer, Jason didn't know what to expect, but he checked. The records showed the Hoa spent over $18, zero on park beautification, but the receipts were vague. Half of them listed special soil, fountain upkeep, and decorative plant acquisitions. Only problem, the park didn't have a fountain. Jason printed everything and handed it to Earl. Earl squinted. "This is fraud. Plain and simple." Jason stared at the pages. "That's what we take to the county." But before they could act, something strange happened. The next morning, all the security cameras Jason installed around his property, 4 of them, went dark at the same time. Motion alert. Then black screen. He ran outside. The wires had been clipped. He checked his car. Muddy footprints on the passenger side. Ellie's booster seat had been moved. Jason didn't panic. He made calls, first to Detective Ruiz, then to his attorney brother-in-law, then to every member of the watchdogs. He wasn't going to back down. Not now. He walked into the house, sat at his desk, and opened the latest message from the neighborhood group. A new post had gone live. From Karen. It read, "Let's all remember who really cares about this community and who's trying to tear it apart with lies. There are consequences for reckless behavior. Always." Jason stared at the screen, then picked up his phone. He called the sheriff's office. "It's time," he said. "We're ready to take this public." Jason wasn't the kind of man who liked drama, but when someone endangered his daughter and then had the nerve to pretend she was the victim, something in him clicked. He called Nolan Briggs. His brother-in-law didn't just pass the bar. He broke records doing it. Calm, calculated, and never one to lose control. Nolan had made a reputation for protecting the little guy from neighborhood tyrants and school boards with too much power. And now, his sights were on Willow Creek. They met at Jason's kitchen table. Papers were spread across the surface. Flash drives, screenshots, printed complaints. Nolan reviewed everything with barely a word. When he finished, he leaned back and gave a slow, deliberate nod. "You've got enough for a civil suit, possibly a criminal referral. But more importantly, you've got a community." Jason looked over at Ellie drawing cartoons with sidewalk chalk on a scrap of paper. Her elbow still had a faint bruise. "I'm not doing this just for me." Nolan nodded. "Then we go all in." 2 days later, Jason delivered a formal letter to the whole office. It wasn't a threat. It was a declaration. The families of Willow Creek were demanding an emergency town meeting. A public forum. Open mic. Cameras welcome. And if it didn't happen within 7 days, they'd take it straight to the county oversight board. The Hoa didn't respond at first, but that didn't stop the movement. Jason printed flyers and hand-delivered them door to door with other watchdog parents. They offered rides for seniors, translation for Spanish-speaking residents, and lemonade for anyone who just wanted to listen. The response was overwhelming. One by one, people came forward, some cautiously, others fired up. The playground closure had sparked outrage, the extra fines, threats, and Karen's smug Hoa emails had piled up for too long. People were ready. Jason stood in front of the clubhouse on Saturday morning and looked out at the growing crowd. He expected maybe a dozen people. Instead, nearly 80 neighbors stood around holding coffee, signs, and printed screenshots. Then came Karen. hair perfectly set, clipboard in hand, flanked by Ron Taggart, the HOA president who had been suspiciously silent through all of this. Karen stood at the edge of the crowd, eyes narrow, jaw clenched. She didn't speak at first. But when Jason stepped up to the mic stand and introduced himself, she snapped. This isn't an official HOA-sanctioned meeting, she barked. None of this is recognized by the board. Jason didn't flinch. Karen, if you'd like to take the mic, you're welcome to. We're not here to fight. We're here to listen. Something the board forgot how to do. That silenced her, if only briefly. One by one, neighbors took the mic. A teenage girl talked about being humiliated for her backyard hammock. A grandfather shared how Karen had reported him for having a flag that wasn't HOA approved. A mother described how her autistic son had been banned from the park after Karen accused him of startling the other children. By the time Jason stepped up again, the tension in the air was thick. I moved here to raise my daughter in peace, he said. But what we've lived under isn't order. It's fear masked as policy. It's one person using power to hurt kids and silence parents, and it ends now. He paused, letting that settle. You're not just neighbors, he continued. You're witnesses. You're part of something bigger. If we stay quiet, nothing changes. If we speak, together, we stop this. A long silence followed. Then, applause. Real, rising applause. Not for Jason, for each other. Karen stormed off. Ron trailed behind her like a ghost. But just when Jason thought the day had reached its peak, a white SUV pulled up to the curb. Two uniformed deputies stepped out. The crowd went quiet. They didn't go to the mic. They didn't ask for Jason. They walked straight past the lemonade table, past the chalk drawings on the sidewalk, and stopped in front of Karen Winslow. The lead deputy spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Karen Winslow, we need to speak with you regarding multiple open complaints and potential misconduct in a public role. Karen's face went pale. Are you arresting me? The deputy shook his head. Not today, but we suggest you get a lawyer. Jason didn't say a word. He didn't need to, because the neighborhood had already heard everything they needed. Karen didn't show her face for 3 days. The neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Some said she'd gone to stay with her sister out in Bakersfield. Others believed she was still inside her house, watching everything from behind her lace curtains. Either way, her silence spoke volumes. Meanwhile, Jason wasn't slowing down. Detective Ruiz called again. This time, the tone was sharper, more deliberate. He wanted Jason to bring everything: documents, videos, HOA letters, and especially the landscaping invoices flagged by Brad, the ex-board member. Jason met Ruiz at a local precinct on a rainy Tuesday morning. He handed over a thick folder. Ruiz flipped through the park beautification receipts. Jason had highlighted the inconsistencies. Multiple payments to a landscaping company that didn't exist. Checks signed by Karen herself, even though she wasn't the treasurer. Ruiz rubbed his temple. This isn't just petty power tripping. If these invoices are fake, we're looking at fraud, possibly embezzlement. Jason nodded. We think she funneled over $25,000 in 1 year. Ruiz's eyes didn't blink. You said we. Who else has seen this? Jason smiled slightly. We've got a team now. Parents, teachers. A retired judge named Earl. We've been digging. Ruiz. Flip to the last page. Then keep digging. Back in Willow Creek, the board was scrambling. Karen may have gone quiet, but her influence still lingered. HOA President Ron tried to restore control by pushing out a surprise vote, a proposed amendment to the bylaws. It would allow the board to suspend residents' voting privileges during ongoing investigations. It was legal-sounding nonsense, But dangerous. Jason and the watchdogs wasted no time. They drafted flyers explaining the amendment in plain language, passed them out door to door, launched a Know Your Rights video on the Willow Creek Watchdog group page. The result? Over 150 residents signed a petition demanding the vote be blocked. The county commissioner got wind of it and issued a warning. Any HOA attempt to restrict resident participation during an open sheriff's investigation could itself be seen as obstruction. The board backed down. Ron canceled the vote, citing miscommunication. But Jason knew the truth. They were panicking. That Friday evening, just before sunset, Jason got a knock at the door. It was Melissa, the woman who'd first shared the video of her son being shoved by Karen. She was holding a folder and looked uneasy. "There's something you need to see," she said. Inside the folder were minutes from a closed-door board meeting held 8 months ago, a session that was never announced publicly. It documented a discussion between Karen, Ron, and the treasurer. The topic: a new conflict deterrence initiative. In plain terms, a plan to issue citations and targeted compliance visits to households that resist community structure. Jason's hands tightened around the paper. "This is a hit list." Melissa nodded. "My house was marked. So was yours. So were the Ortegas. Remember their tire swing that got flagged for visual clutter? And the Nguyens, who had their mailbox torn down after a regulation update." Jason stepped back. "This is systematic." Melissa's voice dropped. "And it's all signed." Karen's signature sat at the bottom of the page, next to a stamp labeled internal use only. Jason scanned it, printed copies, and immediately called Nolan. They now had proof that HOA leadership had targeted residents for retaliation in writing. Later that night, Jason uploaded a redacted version of the document to the Willow Watchdog page. No names, just enough to stir the conversation. The comments exploded. People were angry. Some were scared. Others were ready. Then, just before midnight, Jason received a new message. No name. No profile picture. Just a single attachment. He clicked it. It was footage. Security camera footage. From someone's front porch. Date stamped from 2 nights ago. Karen. 1:47 a.m. walking up a driveway with a flashlight and a can of spray paint. She sprayed something on the family's garage door, then walked away. The camera zoomed in slowly. After she left, 1 word, 4 letters. Liar. Jason didn't move for a long time. He called Ruiz, left a voicemail. Then he went to his fridge, poured himself a glass of water, and looked out the window toward Karen's house. The lights were off, but Jason knew better. The lights might be out, but the fire was still burning. Jason wasn't surprised when Detective Ruiz called him the next morning. The porch footage of Karen tagging Ellie on a neighbor's garage had already made its way to the sheriff's office. Ruiz didn't need a second call. He'd already opened a formal investigation into criminal mischief, harassment, and targeted property damage by a person in an HOA leadership role. Karen had finally crossed the line in a way that couldn't be explained away with bylaws or petty citations. "She's digging her own hole," Ruiz said. "Keep everything documented." "We're close." Jason hung up and checked the Willow Watchdog page. The garage video had quietly made the rounds. He hadn't posted it. Someone else had. Probably the homeowner. No names were mentioned, but everyone recognized Karen in that grainy clip. The scarf, the jacket, the confident stride, even. In the middle of the night. That afternoon, 2 patrol cars were spotted circling the neighborhood. Word spread quickly. The sheriff's office had begun interviews. But they weren't knocking on Jason's door. They were knocking on the HOA board members. And one by one, the foundation began to buckle. The first to resign was Treasurer Wallace Stern, Karen's longtime supporter, and the one who'd co-signed many of the suspicious landscaping invoices. His resignation letter was short and cold. I have chosen to step away from the HOA due to personal reasons. The second was Ron Taggart, the president. He held a brief press conference on his front lawn, surrounded by potted shrubs and a lot of awkward silence. He said nothing of Karen, nothing of the mounting evidence. He simply blamed stress and family obligations before walking back inside. Without taking questions, Jason watched the clip online. Melissa called him 5 minutes later. He knew what she was doing, she said. He just thought nobody would ever fight back. Jason nodded. Well, someone finally did. Karen, however, didn't back down. She resurfaced at the next scheduled board meeting, though now the board was mostly empty. The chairs around her were vacant, the power she once clutched now barely holding shape. But she still showed up in a pale blue pantsuit, clipboard in hand. Eyes sharp. Jason attended the meeting along with Earl, Melissa, and nearly 30 other neighbors. What was normally a silent, stiff room now pulsed with quiet electricity. Karen cleared her throat and read from a prepared speech. There has been a disturbing rise in false allegations, group hysteria, and disinformation aimed at undermining the order of this community. I will not be intimidated. This HOA was built on respect for structure. If you can't live under rules, then perhaps Willow Creek isn't for you. No one clapped. No one even moved. Then Earl raised his hand. Karen frowned. This is not an open forum. Earl stood anyway. His voice was calm, even warm. I've been here longer than you, Ms. Winslow, and what you're doing, it's not structure. It's control. We elected a board to serve the neighborhood, not lord over it. Karen tried to interrupt, but someone else stood up, a young father from the south corner. Then another, a retired school principal, a new mother. One by one, people rose. Karen raised her voice. This is a violation of decorum. Jason stood last. Your decorum doesn't apply anymore. Karen's face twitched. Jason pulled out a thick envelope and laid it on the table. This is a formal petition signed by over 200 Willow Creek residents. It demands your immediate removal from the board and a full audit of HOA finances. He paused. You no longer represent us. Karen stared at the envelope. Her hands trembled for just a moment, just enough for everyone to notice. Then she snapped the clipboard closed and walked out of the room without another word. The next day, the whole office was shuttered with a handwritten sign that read, "Closed until further notice." Calls went unanswered. Emails bounced back. But Jason didn't need confirmation, because later that evening, a quiet black sedan pulled into Karen's driveway. 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies stepped out. They didn't rush. No lights, no sirens. They rang the bell. Karen answered the door in slippers. Arms folded tight. Jason watched from across the street with his arms crossed. No smile. No victory dance. Just a quiet nod. The deputies handed her an envelope. She didn't argue, didn't yell. She just took it, nodded once, and shut the door behind her. Jason turned back toward his house. Ellie's drawing chalked across the walkway, spelling out, "I love you, Daddy." He stepped around it, walked inside, and exhaled. But just as he was locking the door, his phone buzzed. It was a blocked number. The message read, "The board's gone, but not all of us were with her. Some of us were watching you too. Be careful. Who you trust." Jason stared at the screen. Hard THUDDING. So this wasn't over. Not yet. Jason stared at the message longer than he needed to. It was short, direct. No name, No hint of who had sent it. Just a quiet warning that chilled the back of his neck. Some of us were watching you too. Be careful who you trust. Even after Karen's grip seemed broken, someone was still protecting the shadows she built. But Jason wasn't scared anymore. He was tired. And tired people, when pushed too far, stop holding back. The next morning, Jason gathered the watchdogs at Melissa's house. They went over everything again. Documents, resignations, audit requests, copies of Karen's night, visit with spray paint. Jason didn't want loose ends. I think someone from the inside's still leaking information, he said. There's no way that message came from outside. Melissa nodded. We've been focused on Karen, but someone else helped her build this power structure. Earl leaned forward. Then we find the spider behind the web. Jason looked around the table. There were only 5 of them left. The rest had taken a step back after the police involvement. Understandable. But Jason knew what was coming next needed to be done publicly if we want this to stick. He said, we need the entire neighborhood on our side, not just a few of us. 3 days later, Jason and Earl organized an open forum at the town hall building just outside the neighborhood. Gates. It wasn't HOA-sponsored. It didn't need to be. They called it a community reckoning. Over 100 residents showed up. Local news cameras lined the back wall. A few county officials even sat in the front row. Silent but observant. Jason took the mic and began calmly. This isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when the people who were supposed to protect our community decided to use it for their own power. He showed the documents, carefully redacted, the fake invoices, the citations for rule violations that weren't even on the books, and, finally, the plan to suppress community voices using fines and HOA rules as weapons. Then Melissa stepped up. She didn't need notes. She spoke about her son, about how fear kept people quiet, about how silence became routine, until someone finally refused to accept it. By the time Earl took the mic to read off the official audit findings from the county, including nearly $38,000 in misused HOA funds, the entire room was locked in. But the final blow hadn't landed yet. Jason was gathering his papers when someone tapped him on the shoulder. It was Brad, the ex-board member who'd first tipped him off about the landscaping invoices. He leaned in and whispered, "There's something else." Jason followed him outside. Brad handed him a flash drive. I didn't know if I should say anything, but now I think you deserve to see it. Jason uploaded the files when he got home. It was a video recording, time-stamped from 6 months ago. An internal HOA Zoom meeting. Karen, Ron, Wallace, and someone else. A familiar voice. Calm, polished, and chilling. Jason's face hardened. It was Nolan, his own brother-in-law. Jason watched the full video twice. Nolan wasn't aggressive. In fact, he mostly listened. But he was there, sitting in. And when Karen brought up concerns about one of our more vocal residents on Birchwood Lane, clearly referring to Jason, Nolan didn't argue. He didn't speak up. He just sat quietly. Jason leaned back in his chair, numb. Nolan had been his closest ally, the one who reviewed the case files, who pushed the lawsuit forward. Why had he been there? He didn't jump to conclusions. He didn't call Nolan. Not yet. Instead, he called Detective Ruiz. And this time, the detective's voice sounded different, less confident, more measured. "I'm going to be honest," Ruiz said. "I've heard Nolan's name mentioned before. He's represented HOA boards in other neighborhoods. Some of those cases never made it past investigation. Could be nothing, but it's worth watching." Jason ended the call and sat in silence. It all made sense now. How some documents seemed to vanish, how legal pressure always danced just short of impact. He thought they were almost done. But now, Jason realized the fire hadn't gone out. It had just moved deeper underground. The queen bee had fallen, but the hive, it was still buzzing. Jason couldn't sleep. The flash drive still sat on his desk, next to Ellie's latest chalk drawing, a big yellow sun with a smiling face. It was the only thing keeping his hands from shaking. He stared at the paused frame. Nolan, clear as day, sitting silently in the HOAS private meeting. Not saying much, not defending anyone. But he was their dad, and Jason knew exactly what that silence meant. The next morning, Jason sent out one last message to the watchdogs. Final step. Tonight. Town Hall, 7 p.m. He didn't include details. He didn't have to. That evening, the town hall filled again. Standing room only. Residents packed the seats, spilling into the hallway. News cameras were back. County officials were seated up front, alongside Detective Ruiz and 2 uniformed deputies. But Jason wasn't on stage yet. He was behind the curtain, waiting. And Nolan, he was already seated on the side, smiling like a man who had just come from court and already knew the verdict. Jason stepped onto the stage to a quiet murmur. He wasn't carrying a speech, just a folder and the flash drive. "Thank you for being here," he began. "I know this has been a long road, and tonight we finish it." He walked slowly to the projector setup and inserted the drive. The screen behind him lit up, and there it was, Karen's private Zoom call, the now infamous video. Her voice talking about suppressing Jason's complaints, the plan to target dissenting homes, the conversation about how far we're willing to go. And then, at the edge of the screen, Nolan. The crowd fell silent. Jason let the video play for 1 more minute. Then he paused it on a still frame of Nolan listening. Silently, "I trusted someone to help us fight this," Jason said, not looking at the screen. Turns out, he was in the room before we ever started. The crowd shifted. Whispers. Gasps. Jason finally turned to the audience. "That man is my brother-in-law. He told me he'd never worked with Karen, that he was only interested in justice." Jason looked Nolan dead in the eyes. It turns out, justice had a billing code. Nolan stood. SLOW and unflinching. "I attended that meeting once, as legal counsel. I said nothing. Did nothing. You have no proof I acted against you." Jason's voice was calm, but razor sharp. "Maybe not, but we do have something better. Pattern." He clicked the projector again. This time, emails from Nolan's firm popped up, contracts with HOA letters in 3 other neighborhoods, all of which had ended in mass resignations, lawsuits, or quietly buried investigations, all connected back to Nolan. Then Ruiz stepped forward. "We've opened a formal inquiry into Mr. Briggs' involvement," he said. "No arrests at this time, but we strongly encourage full cooperation." Nolan didn't move, just picked up his briefcase and walked out without a word. In the weeks that followed, Willow Creek transformed. The whole board was formally dissolved, under court supervision. A new interim council, made of volunteers, took its place, including Earl, Melissa, and 2 young parents from the South End. The sheriff's department pressed charges against Karen for property damage, harassment, and misuse of HOA funds. She pled guilty to 2 counts and was fined heavily, barred from holding any community leadership positions again. But for Jason, justice didn't come in the form of lawsuits or news headlines. It came on a warm Saturday morning. Ellie was back at the park. The swing she loved had been freshly painted. Her laugh echoed across the yard, free and bright. Jason sat on the same bench where it all started, sipping his coffee, just like before. This time, no one told her to share. No one grabbed a chain. No one watched from behind a clipboard. Earl walked by, tipped his hat. Quiet morning. Jason nodded. Just the way we wanted it. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Earl asked, "So, what about the message? The one that said some of us were watching you too. Ever figure out who sent it?" Jason smiled faintly. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a photo, grainy and low quality. It showed a teenager, the HOAS, male runner, peeking into files late one night with a flashlight. The boy later confessed he'd been reporting back to Karen and others, but something changed. He started sending Jason anonymous tips instead. Jason never revealed him. Didn't need to. Sometimes, Jason said quietly, the people they think are watching you turn out to be the ones waking up. Ellie jumped off the swing and ran over with a beaming smile. "Daddy, I made a new friend." Jason stood and took her hand. "Then let's go say hello." And just like that, the nightmare was over. The gate was open. The board was gone. The neighborhood had taken itself back.